Kinshasa, for example, the capital of the Democratic Republic of Congo and one of the largest cities in Africa, is largely built with one-story and two-story houses. There's rarely a multi-story apartment house because such a structure will require housing finance, which is largely non-existent. In the short time available to me, I want to focus on one more issue. In my research, I have found again and again that the rate of population growth in cities of different population range sizes is on average the same. In other words, large cities do not grow any faster on average than smaller ones, and smaller ones do not grow any faster than larger ones. I've calculated the average growth rates of cities of different sizes for different countries for the world at large in my book, Planet of Cities. And here I focus on recent data for all cities in one country, Colombia, shown in this slide. The data is shown for all 1,000 plus cities in Colombia, some with population below 1,000 people. The population size is on the x-axis on a logarithmic scale. The y-axis shows the city net growth rate. Its projected growth rate minus the average growth rate for all cities between 2020 and 2035. The large dots show the average growth rate for cities in 5 population size ranges. And as I said, these averages are not statistically different from each other. On average, cities of all population sizes grow at similar rates. But when we look at the distribution of all the cities in the graph, we see that a lot of smaller cities are growing at faster rates than larger ones, and a lot of smaller cities are fast losing population as well. In other words, smaller cities will form the bulk of rapidly growing cities where housing demand and the demand for housing resources will be highest and most difficult to solve. At the same time, smaller cities will form the bulk of cities with shrinking populations, where housing problems will have to focus on vacancies, on declining property values, and in the resulting underwater mortgages, as well as on neighborhood abandonment. I'm afraid that in the time allotted to me, I cannot elaborate further on these key findings. Still, we should keep in mind that any global efforts to address housing issues and sustainable finance for housing in smaller cities must recognize several basic facts. First, that most people who inhabit smaller cities, almost 80% of them, live in less developed countries. Second, that the growth of the population of smaller cities in less developed countries will be roughly 17 times larger than the growth of population of smaller cities in more developed countries. Therefore, effective solutions to sustainable housing and housing finance must, by and large, address housing and sustainable finance in the less developed countries. Third, we need to keep in mind that many smaller cities will be places that grow the fastest. This is where the demand for housing and housing finance will be the greatest. And fourth, many smaller cities will be the places that lose population the fastest. This is where the housing problems associated with population loss must be squarely confronted and addressed. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shlomo. I think that was a great opening to set the context. I think some interesting points that you brought to our attention is one is there is no common definition among smaller cities across various countries. I think that's definitely an important consideration as we move forward. I also think you bringing to light that sustainable housing finance matters on the context of where we're looking at, especially when we're looking at developing countries who lack those resources to have the appropriate mechanisms in place as well. So thank you very much, Dr. Shlomo, and I hope we can further dive into some of your recommendations at the end of our discussion. To move to our next speaker, I would like to introduce Mr. Larry Law. And Larry, if I can give you a brief introduction, is an architect by training, has led since 1988 his group of companies to build over 3,000 homes in Canada. One of his signature projects is the Cornell community he developed in Markham in 1997. As a master developer, the project consists of 1,200 acres of land and 10,000 homes for 40,000 residents. His vision at the time was to turn Cornell into a new urbanist community. Larry, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Alex. It is my honor to be here to share a little bit of my opinion about the housing, about the financing of the housing. And before we touching on the financing, and I think it would be important to be aware, housing is not only the hardware that the people live in, it really, relating to a lot of the social element in there. So, and the next slide, please. And I think we need to look at as a holistic betterment of the society. When we are talking about the housing, and that matter so much about the well-being of the people. And if we take care about the well-being, the medical care expenses, will be much healthier. And if we have a nice community, and that means we would have a good and safety community, and which means that, the policing and the environment would be a much enjoyable, quality of life. And also very much related to economy recovery that we really want to work on after the COVID. And however, good or bad, in Canada, and I think most likely, we are lacking of the sufficient labor. And one of the main things is that they just don't have something we call is affordable housing. On the other side, we also refer to attainable housing, a little bit of a definition of affordable housing and attainable housing. Affordable pretty much relating to the underprivileged poor people. Attainable housing is pretty much for the average family. And at this moment, I don't think the average income people, they can have a decent housing because of this kind of a housing crisis, which we did not deal with that for the past 30 years. And as such, though, all depend on about how we can fast track about dealing with this issue. And the most important thing is about wherever we are living, the most important thing we are talking about people, people-centered and people in harmony, especially in the world nowadays, is so much of division and confrontation and me and me instead of we and we. But if we provide a good fundamental of the housing, and I think we can make a good quality of life, and the people would have a much better feeling. As such, though, they have a better productivity, a better of respect to each other, and then only then we can be talking about the good, peaceful world that we are living into or trying to build on. In the long run, that is a cost saving. So if we can go to the next slide, and so when we are talking about financing, if we can understand those kind of things that we just touched on, and I hope that, and then many people can really appreciate the resources and the money that we really need to get on is about the housing financing. Otherwise, we never have enough money, the country never have enough money, no one get enough money. So where you put the money into? So I hope that the people can understand that the money put into the housing is not only for the hardware, it's also for the whole community as well. And now, when we talk about financing, it's a very, very diverse and also complicated as well. Not necessarily, we only talk about the money, but we could be innovative. We could be, very much of efficiency of the land use, efficiency of some infill land and the building as well. And someone mentioned about that, to develop something, it takes years to do so. And the procedure of the approval process, and that's time, and that's money. And the other thing is about everything costs so much. Again, going back to is a supply and demand. So if we can produce more of the housing, and I'm hoping that that may be also one of many, many ways that we can reduce the prices then. Another thing about the financing is the construction know-how and the technique, and we call this thing as a modular construction, and hoping that some money and the financing can be put into this production so that we can have a more of an efficient housing to be produced that way. Absolutely, we got to be talking about the government. We talk about the bank. Basically, we all working for the bank, you like it or not. So hoping that that could be some sort of a special financing arrangement instead of about the typical 25 years mortgage amortization, and we could be talking about 40 years or 50 years, so that it make the mortgage payment more affordable and making the monthly payment for the average family more affordable to do so. Rezoning, and absolutely that we need to be a bit more of flexible about this kind of thing, and someone talking about single family home and so on and so forth. And then we may be talking about something innovative of a mixed use thing, and we're talking about a bit of innovative of about the density and so on and so forth there. So, and I'd like to move on to the next page. And so there are many, many ways talking about the financing, but the most important thing is about what would be the collective action. And we talked about the government, and we're talking about the private sector. And to me, as a private sector developer and builder, hoping that we can very much entice more and more of the business people, and they could have a bit more of a social enterprise spirit. And so that we may be also not only in going back to the traditional project, making money and so, hoping that we can meet in between, with the support of the government's incentive, and hoping that we all chip in together. And also now we talk about the social service organization. And so one building is not for one family, but one building is also can be in partnership with many of the social service organizations, like the homeless people, the mental health, and all this kind of thing. It takes a village to raise a kid. Definitely hoping that we can promote more about our community buy-in, because a lot of things is about, well, I am okay, I'm living in my big house, I'm living in my single home, but no such thing as that we're living by ourselves, and hoping that people will be more open-minded, understanding the issue, be aware of the benefit to be building a good community together. In that sense though, and how do we get there? We get there because we need to have an actionable commitment, a commitment with time frame. It's not just talking and spin the wheel and so on. So as such though, we need to have a measurement, we need to accountability, we need to talk about responsibility. Responsibility that go to every one of us, not only pointing finger to the government, to so and so, is me. We are here to take the responsibility, and hoping that together we will try to make the world a little bit better place to be. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Larry. I think you provided us some good principles at the start there. One for being that housing is not just physical in nature, but it is a place of the word I always hear is intimacy. It has a much greater effect than just being a place to live. And I think you later outlined that there's economic and social benefits to the role that housing could play. I also think your points on collaboration and everyone has a role to play is so important, especially as you mentioned the private sector and what private sector can do, private industries can do to encourage their sector to also continuously play a role in this conversation. So thank you very much, Larry, for joining us again at the Collingwood World Summit. To move to our next speaker, I believe we have a video here, from Mayor Steve Clark of Orillia. Steve has a lengthy track record of active support for the Orillia community. He was a community sports coach for over 17 years and supported numerous community cases and charities. In recognition of his community service, Steve was awarded the Rotary Club Paul Harris Award. The Orillia and District Chamber of Commerce has also recognized his work with the Strengthening Our Community Award and the Hats Off Award. Steve was named Business Leader of the Year with his wife, Chris, and Citizen of the Year.
Hi there, Steve Clark, Mayor of the Sunshine City here, and welcome to the second Collingwood World Summit Habitat and Towns virtual conference. And first off, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the organizers for the invitation to be a guest speaker and provide some insight on a sustainable urban economy. The city of Orillia, located an hour north of the Greater Toronto Area, or GTA, is nestled on the shores of Lake Simcoe and Lake Couchiching. Our population is roughly 35,000 and is expected to grow by 34% by 2031. Until recently, Orillia was considered by many too far north. However, that mentality has changed in recent years. We are a city of culture, arts, recreational, and economic opportunities. And as mentioned, we are located on the shores of two beautiful lakes with a waterfront the envy of many municipalities, a heritage downtown, our iconic opera house, state-of-the-art library, award-winning hospital, two post-secondary educational institutions in Lakehead University and Georgian College, OPP headquarters, the Provincial Grid Control Center for Hydro One, and our recently opened $55 million recreation center. And we are a city known for its festivals, including the famous Mariposa Folk Festival, about to celebrate its 60th anniversary. So we do have much to be proud of. However, we are not without our challenges. And it is a very interesting time. And by interesting, one could insert extremely challenging time. And having just come through a federal election, a number of issues were identified that would mirror the issues in small and large urban centers across Canada. Certainly front and center is the COVID pandemic. But also climate change was there before COVID hit and is still thankfully a priority. Reconciliation with our First Peoples, mental health issues, reviving sectors of our economy and child care availability and affordability all present challenges for many municipalities. However, I will say after numerous meetings with many mayors in our region, it appears the issue dogging every urban center in our region, our province, and across Canada for that matter, is its own version of a pandemic. It's a lack of affordable and a lack of attainable housing. Housing has been a significant issue over the last couple of decades for our most vulnerable citizens, including much of our senior population, and this is still very much true. Our most vulnerable citizens continue to struggle to find appropriate accommodation, that is, shelter or housing with relevant services. Our homeless with mental health or addiction issues, and many seniors who, as they age, find themselves in a situation where they are on a very limited and fixed income, as well as others in our community in low-income situations. However, attaining affordable accommodation has blown into a much broader issue, and COVID has exacerbated this lack or shortage of housing into a full-blown housing crisis. Places like Orillia, Collingwood, Barrie, Midland, Wasaga Beach, and many others are now experiencing an unprecedented demand across the entire housing spectrum. Unprecedented prices for purchases and rentals in a diminished housing inventory situation, while incomes lag far behind exploding housing prices, have created a more critical lack of housing situation. The result is our vulnerable populations are struggling even more to find appropriate accommodation. However, this challenge is now confronting a broader spectrum of our people in our communities. There is a housing shortage right across the entire housing spectrum. Emergency shelter, transitional housing with supportive services, affordable rental accommodation, rent geared to income accommodation or RGI, affordable housing for purchase, single-family dwellings. There is a shortage of all. This increase in demand has driven prices for rent and for purchase to record levels. Add to this that many property owners have cashed in on the new value of their property and sold. Many new owners are evicting tenants so they can move in or so they can renovate and charge more rent for new tenants. And many of these displaced people do have full-time and at least moderately paying jobs, but cannot find accommodation in our new housing environment and are ending up essentially homeless. An issue that has traditionally affected our most vulnerable population is now a much broader issue. We will need to apply some very fresh, creative, and cooperative thinking and action if we are going to make a meaningful difference. We will need to investigate alternative delivery models. We need to continue to increase housing density and intensification. We need alternate delivery models such as tiny homes with smaller footprints, container home projects like the one that was recently erected in Orillia. And we need to explore cooperative communities like the European model for senior women that has presented a much less institutionalized setting. We also need to leverage federal and provincial property and buildings. And certainly, as we have seen during this pandemic, we need more and better delivery of long-term care homes and associated services. We also need services in each of our communities that connect people with appropriate and available accommodation. Simply doing what we have been doing has not had the desired effect of reducing our housing crisis. It is possible the only meaningful solutions to what is our housing crisis lies in enhanced partnerships across the 4 levels of government. Municipalities and regional bodies need financial support from the federal and provincial governments. Municipalities need to be creative and implement community improvement programs, or CIPs, that support not-for-profit organizations that deliver housing and even potentially motivate the private sector involvement to do the same. We know the most meaningful way to end chronic homelessness is to move people through emergency accommodation and transitional housing. We also know for anyone to have a life with some stability and predictability, we need to ensure they have an appropriate roof over their head. You can mitigate many of the challenges people face in their daily life if they have this type of stability. And although we must continue with some of the programs in play at the moment, simply doing status quo is not solving the problem. In fact, the housing crisis continues to worsen. We need new levels of cooperation, new delivery models, legislative changes, and private sector involvement. Our communities only work and are only truly sustainable when we all have the necessities of life. Thank you. Merci, miigwech.
So thank you to the mayor for sending that video in there. He outlined a number of models that can be further explored, and he also spoke to the growing regional challenge of housing in the Georgian Bay region, I believe, and how attainable housing is becoming a challenge for all people, especially those most vulnerable. So thank you so much to the mayor for sending that video in. Our next speaker is Mayor Cam Guthrie, Mayor of Guelph. So Mayor Guthrie was re-elected Mayor of Guelph in 2018 after serving as mayor from 2014 to 2018 and as a councillor for Ward 4 from 2010 to 2014. Mayor Cam was a licensed insurance broker and local entrepreneur for 16 years before he became mayor, an avid community volunteer, served on the boards of several local nonprofit organizations, and has mentored startups and small business owners through the Business Center of Guelph, Wellington. Mayor, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much, Alex, and to everybody that's joined today. I do really appreciate it. And just as a little thing off the top, I was actually born in Collingwood, so there you go. A little tip about me there. Whenever people ask, "Are you born and raised in Guelph?" I say, "Well, the born part, Collingwood. I was there for a little bit, so maybe one day I'll be coming back there." So nice to be part of this conference. I really appreciate it. And I always keep in mind the same thing actually as the mayor just said before in the video there, that housing spectrum, sort of all the different slots of different housing types. And, you know, at one end is the homelessness, and at the other end is market ownership. And what I wanted to do today was I wanted to focus a little bit on the Guelph perspective of those two ends, homelessness and the housing of market. I might touch on a little bit of what the former mayor just stated there. But also I wanted to leave everybody at the end with sort of two things that Guelph is doing that I think is really cool. Yeah, I'm a mayor that talks like that. I think it's really, really cool. So I hope that you like it, and maybe you can look to implement it wherever you are. So to kick things off, we have about 135,000 people, 140,000 people in Guelph. And I would say that nearly 6,000 of those households are identified as being in core housing need. That means that their housing is just inadequate, unstable, or unaffordable, and they can't afford any alternative type of housing. The other issue that Guelph has specifically is that our vacancy rate is at 1.4%, which is well below that sort of average 3%. And 41% of tenant households in Guelph spend 30% or more on their income or shelter, and that's considered unaffordable. We know that homelessness also is actually a crisis, not only for the individual, but it's expensive for the overall taxpayers as well, that issue. It costs about $1,932 per month to house a person in shelter. Not to say that there's any real correlation here between housing and shelter and the stat that I'm about to give, but just as an example, it costs like $4,300 just for provincial jail, or almost $11,000 per month for a hospital bed, just to give a perspective of the costs there. On the other hand, of course, as many of us know, rent supplements are about $700 a month, social housing, $200 per month. So for those who think that, rent supplements or social housing is too expensive, think again, because the math is actually very, very clear. And if we don't provide that stable, affordable type of housing, we actually just pay many times over, sometimes in emergency costs, hospital costs, and so on. So one thing we've done in Guelph, and some other cities are doing this too, but we have what's called a by name list, and it actually identifies people that are homeless. And we know these individuals, and we actually know their needs. And so a few years ago in Guelph, we had 170 people named on that list. And I'm pleased to kind of announce now, because of some direct focus on this area, we're down to 103 now. So we're making progress on the housing issue and sustainable and supportive housing. A few years ago, there was 0 supportive housing for that particular segment. And in the last year, we've now got 3 of that type of housing types that are happening. And I would say, it's mayors don't get all the credit here. I'm the first one to admit that. It's been nonprofit. It's been upper levels of government. It's been everybody really working together and focused on that issue. Now, at the other end of the spectrum, not homelessness, but is the housing ownership part of it. And I'm a mayor, but I'm also a dad with 2 kids. And I got to tell you, 2 teenagers. And I got to tell you, I am really, really concerned, like very, very concerned about my 2 kids and what the heck they're going to do when it comes to any type of rent or even home ownership. And don't tell them I said this, but I do want them out of the house as soon as possible. Yeah. So between 2005 and 2021, Guelph's median household income has only increased about 30%, but our average selling price in that time has gone up 180%. And so I believe, municipalities do have a role to play in increasing supply, reducing red tape, maybe allowing fewer parking spots here and there. But we need to have the courage and the political will to actually do these types of things. And sometimes you could have a mayor do it and a few councillors, but not all of council agrees. And we all know how the municipal governance works in Canada. The mayor is only 1 vote. So it is an important thing that needs to be brought up many times over, not just during a term, but also during elections, to see what people are trying to do when it comes to housing types. So I want to actually also indicate here that we need to speak up against the NIMBY crowd when it comes to housing. The not in my backyard. We got to start speaking up, and it can't just be mayors and councillors. We have to have community members start rallying around why we need all types of housing in other places. So, okay, I told you I'd end with two things, two ideas to take away. So here's your first one. The first cool thing. I said they'd be cool. So here we go. The first one is that Guelph and Wellington, we actually launched Canada's first circular food economy, which aims to make healthy local food more available and helps take waste out of the food system. And one popular aspect of this program is community gardens, where people can access fresh food like all around in their neighborhoods. And we've really been increasing that. And if you think about housing, it's not just the housing, the capital or the structure itself that requires overhead. But if you can reduce overhead costs when it comes to living in a home, you are trying to help with that sustainable sort of infrastructure that's around the house, like a community garden. And the second thing that's really cool is we're calling it the PACE program in Guelph, Property Assessed Clean Energy. So under this model, a property owner can actually look to borrow money through an account connected to the city, and they can use the money for energy retrofits on their own properties. And they get to pay it back through their property taxes. So this will help finance the upfront capital costs when it comes to making, addressing climate change with making your house more efficient. But then it reduces your overall monthly costs for these types of units that people own. And I would say that it's incumbent on us and other nonprofits and for-profits and agencies to put these types of things into homes when they build it, to make the overall costs of running these types of homes cheaper as it is from the get-go, and for retrofits like the program that I just mentioned that Guelph is looking into. So that's just a high-level snapshot of what's going on in Guelph from a sustainability point of view when it comes to our neighborhoods, from a food perspective, and from a climate change, energy reduction perspective that people can do on their homes. And I hope those two things are takeaways. And I really appreciate you having me here. And I look forward to the rest of the discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mayor Cam. Definitely appreciate your comments on encouraging leadership and political will to get things done. Oftentimes, it's hard, for people in leadership positions to be bold, as well as, in the spirit of collaboration as well. We often talk about, the private sector needs to be part of the conversation, but the community, of course, as well. I think the two programs you outlined, there's been a growing interest in food, especially low-tech, high-tech food. If anyone joined us at the Urban Economy Forum that was held the last 3 days, we had a special session on specific to food as well. And I think your PACE program, there's a converging crisis between housing and climate change, and understanding how housing can reduce and mitigate our impacts on climate, I think is an important conversation. And I think the PACE program aims, of course, to address that. Okay, to move on here, our next speaker, I would like to introduce Mayor Mick Maline, Mayor of Town of New Tecamus. I'm sorry, I butchered that. Mayor Rick is currently serving his second term as mayor and has held a variety of positions in municipal politics for almost 3 decades. Prior to becoming mayor, he was elected to the position of the deputy mayor until 2014, and he was also the mayor of the town of Alliston from 1985 to 1991. Mayor, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. And I would like to thank the organizers of the second Collingwood World Summit, Habitat in the Town, and also a special thanks to you, Alex, to be our moderator. For inviting me to speak about the sustainable development in the town of New Tecumseh. I know many of us are eager to get back to the normal after what we've experienced in the last 18 months with the pandemic. However, this isn't just a time to return to normal. This is a time for us to inspire to something even better. As much as the pandemic has put our lives on pause, it has given us a chance to learn from our experience of marginalized folks in our society. And as we build our towns, we must do it thoughtfully while addressing the inequities in our community. New Tecumseh's journey has been impressive. For 30 years ago, we became the town of New Tecumseh after an amalgamation of 4 communities: Allison, Beaton, Tecumseh, and Tottenham. As a result of many people, many generations working together for the greater good, an actual labor of love. Our values are rooted in humility, ingenuity, optimism, and hope. These are the core principles that have laid the foundation of this great town, shaping where we've come from and where we're going. We are a multicultural town where our residents speak over 65 different languages, and we've always found strength in our diversity. And when we confront the big issues in our community, we must do it in a way that is inclusive and safe for the people of all races and culture, as well as the people across the gender spectrum. In many ways, the pandemic has taught us that we can respond quickly and effectively to big challenges, and has illustrated the need to foster sustainable urbanism, achieving a balance of promoting complete communities with the preservation and the protection of agricultural and rural areas, working together with the community, business, and the town government to accomplish our goals as a town. I believe as we emerge from this global health pandemic, this will be a period of great renewal for the town of New Tecumseh. At a foundation level, we're starting at a position of strength. Since 2015, construction values in New Tecumseh are at almost $910 million, which reflects the fact investors and developers have brought into our vision of building complete communities. The town's official plan speaks to the town's vision of retaining the 3 physical distant communities that will grow as a unified town, where residents have diverse urban areas while celebrating their agricultural and rural heritage. Promoting compact urban communities, residential intensification, and reuse of buildings and enhancements in our downtowns to encourage vibrancy. Our community improvement plan, developed to support more growth and development in our town, promoting the conservation, enhancement, and the beautification of existing buildings and properties in the downtown. We've recently expanded this program to support residential, commercial, and industrial developments. Almost 50 businesses have taken advantage of this program, receiving grants totaling almost $600,000, showing our commitment and investment in our community. Council established an environmental advisory committee this year, which will focus on exploring water conservation initiatives and increasing recycling opportunities at the town's facilities, and develop a new Tecumseh climate change strategy. This past June, Council endorsed the Nottawasaga Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan, focusing on initiatives like mental health and addiction, housing, and job creation for the betterment of our community and its members. By engaging in genuine conversation with residents and business, we laid the groundwork for a shared success of these urban centers, enabling our residents to work, play, and shop only steps from their front door. These communities also included important green spaces. And aren't we so lucky to have a town with over 55 parks, covering almost 70 hectares of land? During the pandemic, we were certainly reminded what an incredible asset these green spaces were. Each of the 3 communities has strong ties to the environment, from the Boyne River, which crosses Alliston and is a focal point for residents to enjoy, to the Beaton Creek, the gem of Tottenham Conservation Area, providing a natural gateway for residents in Tottenham, and the Trans-Canada Trail, the longest trail network in the world, connecting Canadians to nature and to one another from coast to coast. 26 kilometers of trail runs through New Tecumseh with the multiple points of interest along this section, allowing all to experience and to explore the beauty of New Tecumseh. The town's TMP is nearing completion and will endeavor to promote active transportation in the town, as well as proposing public transit to improve links between the communities and to other Simcoe County towns to help reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Making it easier for people to walk, bike, or take transit, connecting our communities and providing accessibility for everyone. It might sound unrealistic, but we were able to move quickly on these actions because we took the time to slow down and have a real conversation with our community. All of these things that we have implemented and are continuously working on will enhance our vision of New Tecumseh as a place where people can find a home and feel at home. And I think the last piece is so important because when you're building a more equitable society, you have to start where the people live. And that's why we've so invested in finding ways to make housing more accessible to everyone in New Tecumseh. It takes more than just buildings, more houses. It's about rethinking the way we design our community. We need more housing types so that when you downsize, you don't have to leave your neighborhood. And when your family is growing, you can find an affordable option that provides the space you need. These are the type of actions that will help us address the inequity that still exists in New Tecumseh. Because at the end of the day, we all need to ask ourselves, what kind of a town do we want to be? For many, New Tecumseh is already a fantastic place to live and work with abundance of green space and a thriving community. We are building a New Tecumseh where we all feel a deep sense of connection to our local business, to our neighborhoods, and to our green spaces. So many great things are happening in our town these days, and I have barely scratched the surface. So I encourage everyone to reach out, ask questions, learn more about our projects. We greatly value your ideas and input as we work to ensure our community continues to thrive. Before I wrap up, I want to thank everyone who played a part in getting us to where we are today. I look forward to working with all of you to build an even more successful and equitable town. Thank you once again, Alex.
Thank you, Mayor. New Tecumseh. I think I got it, yeah? I hope so. Anyways.
It's all right, Alex. I struggled with it for many years.
So thank you so much, Mayor, for as well as your inviting welcome to ask questions at the end there. I think you outlined a number of different examples in terms of the developing a complete community. I also am starting to hear a recurring theme around this idea of demand for all spectrums of housing, which I think is of course an important feature and something that will likely need to be included in our UEF 2021 resolution as we remember to think back as to part of our conversation on why we're doing this. So again, thank you, Mayor. So I'd like to introduce, we have 3 speakers left. I must admit I'm not doing great on time here. So our next speaker is Henny Boats, CEO and founder for Moladi Construction Systems. Henny has gained more than 30 years of experience in the construction industry, an astute product designer, inventor, passionate entrepreneur, and born philanthropist. He has won numerous accolades, acknowledging his contribution and unique insight into the complexities of government and business is working together. Henny, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Alex. Can I share my screen?
Yes, it should be available to you.
Oh, lovely. Thank you. Yes. Okay, so thank you very much for the opportunity. It's just gone 9 o'clock here in South Africa. And I'm very excited to present this to you because every speaker that spoke in reality is what Moladi addresses. I would say that I always ask why, and this opens the doors in my mind. So I ask, why do we produce bricks still today? Like this, you know, the Egyptians did this 3,500 years ago, and we still do this. Why do we lay bricks on top of the other? We have waste, we have dependent on skilled labor, we have a lot of waste, and it's slow, etc. So it costs a lot of money to produce homes in this process. Now, I understand that Canadians and Americans and maybe somewhere in the East, a brick and mortar is not the accepted norm. But if you look at Africa, for instance, we need 4 million homes in Africa. We need 96,000 houses every day, according to the United Nations. So I will then highlight a little bit about brick production in India, where CO2 gases are polluting the world enormously. If I look at the latest earthquake in Haiti, then I ask, why cement blocks? If I look at the United States and I look at how people cast their basement, and after the basement, which I believe needs to be waterproof and strong in order to carry everything, then they go and they put stick on top of it. So, you know, if I look at the process of stick building, then it's also fairly antiquated in the terms of America. Then, of course, the latest bushfires, you know, timber houses like just a piece of paper, it'll go up in flames. Then when you have hurricanes, they don't stand against that. And, you know, you can have Hurricane Mitch destroy $30 billion worth of homes. And the next day they come back and build stick houses. So, you know, for me, I ask why? So then obviously, isn't it time for change? And, you know, I believe that one of the mayors mentioned, you know, we need to look at something new. So I can just imagine Henry Ford fighting the horse and carriage people. they weren't very they were very reluctant to let go of their industry. So Muladi exports to 26 countries. We're not a builder, we're a technology supplier. So we support youth, unemployed youth, entrepreneurs, we establish cooperatives. We supply builders, contractors, developers, and we also assist governments with delivering of their homes. So Muladi is not a builder. We produce in our factory here in Port Elizabeth, we injection mold all the components to create a mold of a house. So we clip the formwork together, they're all modular, and we then erect this on a foundation. All our components is packed in boxes, we ship in containers, we ship them out, we then open the container, we take a raft former and we cast our first foundation according to engineer specification for the soil condition. While that is curing and hardening, we then clip the formwork together using the local community, and the formwork panels are then erected on the foundation. So you would have basically a bedroom here, a second bedroom there, a bathroom, a lounge, and a kitchen. This is a 54 square meter house, and this goes for about $17,000. So very few people in the world produce homes for $10,000 or $15,000 or $17,000. They all aim for the top of the pyramid. So the majority of homes required in the world, as the one mayor again said, is at the base of the pyramid, and we're not addressing that. So in between the formwork, we put the door frames, the window frames, the plumbing, the electricity, everything is in position, and then we mix a lightweight aerated mortar and we pour it inside of the formwork. So I can either pour it manually or we can pump it in. So once the formwork is filled, the formwork is removed the following day and re-erected on the next foundation. So in reality, it's like baking cookies. So you have very good thermal properties. You have speed of construction, which means that you reduce waste, you reduce cost. Now, all of a sudden, you can produce a house complete in one day because it takes a week for the foundation, week for the first house, and as the mold is removed, it's re-erected on the next foundation. And the formwork can be used 50 times. So we can use one mold to produce one house in one day, or 1,000 molds will produce 1,000 houses in one day. That's the beauty about what we do with Maladi. This is one of the first houses that we cast in 1987. I still had black hair. This is in Cape Town. These apartments in South African Rand, they've doubled in 8 years. So from the time that we built them to the time that some of them in the market, they've doubled in price. Then in Tanzania, we did this unit. In Namibia, close to Angola, we did this really in the desert. We did this unit. And in Botswana and Palape, we did this boutique hotel, 48 units in record time, 6 months. The other day or last year, I was in Trinidad and Tobago. We produced this house for $12,000, 52 square meters. It's about 530 square foot for $12,000. Then, you know, once you build 1,000 houses, you must remember in about 9 months, you're going to have 1,000 babies. So then we need to look at classrooms, clinics, schools, all the amenities that go with it. So you need to look at a holistic development. So we use Maladi in the Northern Cape where the diamonds are. We use that for clinics, ablution blocks, which is a big thing for classrooms in Africa. You just don't have enough toilets. Then student accommodation, it's a massive market. You need to have close to universities, especially in Nigeria and Lagos and Abuja. Then this is one of our feather in the cap developments. We were funded by the World Bank for 16 courthouses in Tanzania. And this was a $65 million funded by the World Bank. And there's a wonderful article in the World Economic Forum about Maladi. So the first thing, obviously, when you walk in a house is a knock test, social acceptance. Then how much and how long will it last? So all the awards, we've jumped this for 34 years. You know, so we've got a lot of accreditation, a lot of bank approvals. We're at the point now we created our own bank. So this is my philosophy is, you know, why should we mold a brick when we can mold a house? This becomes far more economical to do it holistically and fast. So carbon footprint, normally I do this PowerPoint in about 4 hours. So I'm having a bit of a difficulty doing it in between 5 and 7. So please forgive me. This is at the back there, you can see the bricks lying down. It was built in this configuration. And this is what they will call a 14-pound hammer. And Wilhelm is a fairly big guy. So that's the strength of the wall. So, you know, if you look at, for instance, at hurricanes or you look at earthquakes, Maladi does not collapse. So I ask myself, if this is the supply chain and the backlog is so big, has traditional not created this? Because traditional is not going to fix this. They're quite happy with this backlog. So we need to look at new technology. My age group, I look at Michael Schumacher. Michael Schumacher stands on the podium. He wins a race because he himself is a phenomenal sportsman. He has a phenomenal car that doesn't break, but he has people in the pits that change tires in 6 seconds. So what Maladi has done is we've concentrated on putting a team together in the pits so that we have town planners, engineers, architects, everything, so that we streamline delivery. So we don't sit around the table and then we send drawings out to an architect in another office. Everybody is on board. Solar panels, we're speaking to another South African, Elon Musk, for his Tesla panels, so that at least, you know, we know that they're not going to plonk within the first week. So of course we cannot solve our problems with the same level of thinking.
Could I ask you to provide closing remarks? I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, we are. So if we put tires on a donkey car, we're not going to speed it up. It's superficial. What we need is a new model. And this is really what I believe how we should address housing, is to implement a new model. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Henny. If I only waited 20 seconds, I wouldn't have had to be so interruptive. Anyway,
That's fine.
Thank you so much. And thank you for bringing technology to this conversation. I think technology definitely has a place, when we're talking about sustainable housing and housing finance. So I think this is good to bring to our conversation, and something that we should be thinking about in our 2021 resolution. The next speaker I would like to introduce here is Mr. John Palmer, Dr. John Palmer, who is a professor of economics at Western University, and he's also a senior advisory board of UEF, so good colleague of Urban Economy Forum. John, please go ahead. You're mute, John.
There we go. Thank you. And good afternoon and good morning, good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm really sorry that I couldn't make it over the weekend for the Urban Economy Forum, but those of you who have seen me before or have seen some of the things that I've written know that I take probably a very different approach to the approach that many of you have on how to deal with urban problems, and especially housing affordability. I'm going to try to share my screen now and start the slideshow. This presentation has grown out of some work that I've done with a man named Steve LaFleur, the Fraser Institute. Our approach is that we want to look at only one of the many segments of housing that many of you have talked about. We want to look at housing for people who are otherwise unable to find any kind of housing, people who are homeless or who are down and out, people who are in need of very basic housing. So this aspect of housing that we're looking at is just multiple tenant housing. That's what that MTH stands for. Rooming houses, flop houses, bed sits, call them what you like, but they're basically just one room with no running water in the room. There's a shared bathroom down the hall or in the basement. There might be a provision for a fridge or a microwave, and there might be a common shared kitchen that you can use. And usually the rentals are short-term, weekly or monthly. And they're usually single occupancy, unless we're looking at something like dormitories, which of course many of us have lived in, which are like rooming houses or flop houses or multi-tenant housing. They're usually ideal for people who are recent immigrants, either newcomers to the city from outside the city or from outside the province or from outside the country even. They need a place that's inexpensive where they can stay for a while, get their feet on the ground before they bring the rest of the family in, look around, find a job, find a home, something like that. They're wonderful for that sort of thing. They're also good for people who are in transition due to a job loss, a family breakup, or maybe trying to avoid some abusive situation that they can't get out of otherwise, or that they find it very difficult to live in. A rooming house provides a break for people. And a number of the people that I've spoken with were in exactly that situation. It's also ideal, rooming houses are ideal for people looking for comparatively safe housing, especially something in comparison with what their options are. And that's what we try to talk about all the time. What are their options? Well, if their options are basically shelters or illegal campsites or other illegal housing, then maybe rooming houses are not a bad idea. And of course, rooming houses are good for students. Rooming houses have lots of problems. Compared with what? Well, living in a squat, living in a campsite, those are not particularly safe places. The problems in multi-tenant housing may not be bad compared with staying in an abusive relationship. It may not be bad compared with living in substandard illegal housing about which the tenants are afraid to complain, or maybe even living in government-provided fenced-in ghettos. There was one that was operated here in London, Ontario this past winter that was basically a fenced-in ghetto, much like a prison almost, that provided housing and food for people who were otherwise homeless. But it was well guarded, well protected. They wouldn't let me take pictures from outside even when I went over to view and to talk to the people who were monitoring the housing. And of course, compared with the other thing is compared with the option of maybe paying more to live in a licensed, fully legal unit or an apartment, but then you don't have as much money for something else. People might say they would prefer something else. So we always ask, are they safe? Compared with what? That's always an important question. And one of the important quotes that we got when we looked into this was, I'd rather take a chance on living in a building that isn't completely fireproof than live in a shelter or on the streets, where the chances of getting hurt, robbed, or killed are pretty serious. What about the risk of fire death? Some interesting, but not quite comparable numbers. And I know these are not comparable, okay? But they give you some insight into what the numbers might be like if we could get good numbers. In the past 10 years, an average of only 1.5 deaths per year occurred due to fire involving rooming houses in Toronto. In the past 10 years, there were 74 deaths per year due to fire in structures throughout Ontario. Okay, now compare that with between 2017 and 2020, there were over 11 deaths per year due to accidents among homeless people in Toronto. Now, accidents don't necessarily mean fire, so they're not comparable, but that's just accidents. What if we include some other groups like other or unknown or pending? Then there were 37 deaths per year of homeless people. Compare that with 1.5 deaths per year in multi-tenant housing due to fires. That's a lot smaller number and a lot better than 11 per year or 37 per year. As they say, I know it, they're not strictly comparable, but that's the way they are. Nevertheless, well-intentioned people worry about the safety of multi-tenant housing. And as I think it was Mayor Clark and Mayor Cam both said, there's an awful lot of NIMBYism out there. People don't want a rooming house in their neighborhood. They understand that there's likely to be, not always will be, but there's an increased probability of crime, drug paraphernalia, etc. And so they don't want those things. But what they say is, they won't say it that way. They say, oh, we're worried about the safety of these buildings. They have to be built so that people are safe in them. I think sometimes that's just a smokescreen for our NIMBYism. And what they're really saying is, we don't want anyone to live in our neighborhood who can't afford not to live like that, like the housing in the multi-tenant housing. The solution is very simple. And all of you've talked about it. It's increase the supply of rooming houses. Okay, well, how do we increase the supply of rooming houses? Almost every person that I've listened to today has talked about plans for how the government can get involved in building more affordable housing. That's not what Steve and I talked about. What Steve and I are concerned about is, and some of you talked about this, Marg talked about it in her presentation on an earlier panel. Mayor Clark mentioned it, Cam certainly mentioned it. Cut down the red tape. Make it possible for people to build buildings that using new technologies like the technology that we saw from Malady. If we can increase the supply by freeing up developers and homeowners, then we can use less red tape, fewer restrictions, and that will increase the supply of affordable housing at the rooming house level. We've gone through some of the reports from a group called Métis, the Maytree Association in Toronto. They point out that it can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to build a house that's up to code for rooming houses, as opposed to converting a house. And it can cost between $75,000 and $125,000 just to convert a single family dwelling home to a rooming house. The problem here is that we see these kinds of illegal rooming houses all over the place. All of the fires that were talked about were in illegal rooming houses. And the solution isn't not to crack down on them. The solution is to open up the red tape so that more people can build more of these, more developers, more private developers can build them. I called the city hall here in London to say, what do I have to know to build a rooming house? They said, you can't know it. You'll have to hire an architect. And then you take a look at the Ontario Building Code. It's really monumental. So my plea is for everyone, all of you people who are city councilors and mayors, is think about how you can reduce the red tape. Is it possible to reduce the red tape by getting rid of the requirement that there be firewalls between the units in rooming houses? I lived in a rooming house that did not have firewalls when I was living in a rooming house. That's where this is coming from, by the way. Is I once lived in a rooming house, and I lived in a rooming house. The bathroom was down in the basement. Wasn't even on the same floor. Things like that are certainly feasible, and I preferred that to living on the street or trying to couch surf with some friends. I would have lost the friends if I'd had to do that. So I'm urging people, cut down on the red tape, get rid of these requirements. I think it was Mayor Cam who said, get rid of some of the requirements about parking. We don't need to have one parking space for every single rooming house unit when it comes to rooming houses. In other words, let's make some regulations. Let's reduce the regulations that are going to make it for what renters might choose, not something that we would want our children to live in. Thank you very much. And thank you, Alex, for inviting me.
Thank you, John. Always appreciate your presentations that come back to that, as you always say, pricing and supply. I think what's nice about your presentation here today is you're reminding us, when we talk about environmental sustainability, these building codes that we're talking about, we also have to remember that it is increasing regulations and does have it does limit our supply and increasing pricing. So when we're designing these different models, we need to ensure that we remember how to ensure that we're reflecting that.
Good summary, thank you.
We have our last speaker here, which is Mayor Danny Breen. Mayor Danny Breen was first elected to the St. John City Council in fall of 2009 and was re-elected by acclamation in 2013, representing Ward 1 in the east end of St. John's. He was elected as mayor of the city of St. John's in September 2017 and will be acclaimed as mayor in 2021. Mayor Breen, the floor is yours.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you very much for the invitation. And I just also want to acknowledge my fellow mayors there. We all are part of a club. It's kind of a self-help group we have for mayors across the country, and we need the pep talk every now and then to keep us going. But it's great to see you, and I hope everybody is staying healthy and getting back to some sense of whatever that new normal is that we're going to be dealing with. Just to let you know a little bit about St. John's, North America's oldest city, and uniquely enough, we're the youngest capital city even though we're the oldest city in North America, we're the capital city of the youngest province in Canada. So we're Newfoundlanders like to pride themselves on being unique, and that we just another area of our uniqueness. We're a small city. We're an energy powerhouse, and our companies and technologies can be found worldwide. We're building a robust expertise in ocean technologies, and Memorial University in Newfoundland is Canada's only university that's ranked internationally for the study of marine and ocean engineering. Our history is built on the arts, natural resources, fishing, mining, and the energy sector, and oil and hydro are critical to our economic future. And we're also well known for being able to tell a story and sing a song. Right now, the population of St. John's is roughly about 110,000 people and about 47,000 households. And we're the hub for a metropolitan region with close to half the province's population within a 30-minute drive of the capital city. Our population is rapidly changing and diversifying. Those in the 25 to 34-year age group are showing the greatest decline, while our seniors population is on the rise. Currently, about 60% of our population own their own homes. This year, it's being the level of government that's closest to our residents, we understand the challenges they face on a daily basis. This year, St. John's finalized its first Healthy City strategy, which provides decision makers, staff, partners, and stakeholders with a framework to consider health and wellness as part of their strategic planning, budgeting, and delivering of our programs and services. The vision of the plan is a progressive, inclusive, and connected city with active, healthy citizens living in affordable, accessible, complete neighborhoods where citizens can move about freely, connect with the natural environment, and feel a sense of belonging. Having a formalized strategy helps engage and align the community and other levels of government on issues that matter to them while promoting change at the neighborhood level. In fact, our Healthy City strategy is unique. It's based on a partnership with our provincial regional health authority and a decision that demonstrates the importance we place on working collaboratively to achieve our common strategic goals. As we all know, sustainability and wellness are codependent. It's all about making small changes in our systems and neighborhoods that promote mental and physical health, strengthen capacity, and create a healthy future for everyone. One of the 6 pillars of our new plan is housing. The strategy focuses on good urban design, supporting the creation of complete mixed-use neighborhoods for all new and redevelopment opportunities. We believe that to be a city with a wide range of affordable, adequate, and accessible housing options, we can't work alone. Our accessible and affordable housing plan addresses housing needs by working with partners, the industry, stakeholders, and residents to create and maintain safe, suitable, and affordable housing. We collaborate across all 3 levels of government and with our community and business partners to achieve housing and homelessness sector commitments and advocate for systemic changes in support of a healthy city. St. John's avails of programs such as the National Rapid Housing Initiative. This year's investment of $5 million will create a minimum of 14 new permanent affordable housing units in the city. Our Housing Catalyst Fund with the Community Housing Transformation Center supports practical and collaborative projects with community groups and others to facilitate and plan housing solutions that will enhance the quality of life for individuals and families and build healthier community. We also manage and maintain over 480 affordable housing properties in the city. According to our recent citizens satisfaction survey, 87% of our residents want us to find a balance between essential and non-essential infrastructure, with housing topping the list of non-essential infrastructure items. So you can see the challenge that we face, and I think a lot of municipalities would face the same challenge. Those without a housing deficiency don't really see the municipality's role in the housing sector, and that leads to the NIMBYism, and it also leads to the other economic challenges that we face. The challenge we also face in making housing a priority, there are so many demands on our limited resources. So it's clear we can't rely on municipal taxation alone to ensure sustainable housing in our communities. We have and we need partnerships to do that. And those partnerships are not just with other levels of government, they're across the industry and across the communities. Financing sustainable housing is and must be a collaborative effort. To fully address our municipalities' housing needs, we must continue to work in step with our partners, be open to new ideas, and take advantage of funding opportunities to create and maintain safe, suitable, and affordable housing throughout the city. So I've heard some other comments around NIMBYism, and it's an issue in every municipality across the country. We actually developed a NIMBY toolkit guide, where we actually went out and gave it to developers, explained to them what they needed to deal with the NIMBYism aspect of developments as they move forward, put it into place, and actually it's been quite successful. But at the end of the day, you have to have the political will to overcome NIMBYism, and it's something that we're working on, and we've been quite successful with lately. So thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation again to join me today.
Thank you, Mayor Breen. And I found the one statistic you shared about the public, not your residents, not seeing the municipal sector as having a role in and housing. Definitely something that I find interesting. Again, relating back to that NIMBYism. So we have about 8 minutes left, and of course, I promised the organizers here that we would discuss. So we should take some time to open the floor to yourselves. If you have any follow-up questions, anything that you believe would be a good addition to the resolution on housing finance, something that the second Collingwood World Summit needs to consider as we move forward to integrate housing finance in our I suppose guiding document, either through principles or recommendations. I think there was a number of good principles and recommendations outlined here that I continue to document, but I open the floor to the speakers now to further discuss, ask questions, or such. Do we have any first takers? Follow-up questions are fine too. I do, if nobody has any immediate questions from the speakers, I do see a question here from Chris R. If anyone's able to speak to the specifics on innovative, affordable housing finance.
Can I come in there, Alex?
Yes, please do, Henny.
I just come back from Ghana, and on the previous room I did speak about this, so I hope I'm not repeating myself, but maybe hopefully there's new ears on this, in this room and on this platform. We spoke to every minister under the presidency, so we spoke also with the Speaker of Parliament. And we got, for instance, we got the Minister of Defense, the Minister of Education, and the Minister of Police. And they all allocated their staff who did not have housing as a database to us. Now, under normal situation, it is government's responsibility to give you an offtake agreement. But most of the African governments are bankrupt, mismanaged. There's not enough money, and if there is money, it goes for different purposes than housing. So what we then did is we pre-qualified the 60,000 people in Ghana, and then we could see that let's say somebody earned $2,000 a month, $5,000, $10,000, $12,000, $15,000, $20,000. All of a sudden, we would be able to produce a house for that pay packet, which means a third of the value of that pay packet would become a mortgage. When we did this, we then categorized people into a home that they could afford, and we took this package to financiers. And we said to the financiers, the current rate of the banks in Ghana is between 27 and 28% for a mortgage. So once you put a third of the value of a house on interest over 20 years, you pay an enormous amount of money just over to the banks. So what we did is we said to investors, now if you look at the US or Canada or Holland or Netherlands and England, the return on investment is very small, 1, 2, maybe 3%. So what we said is, give us your money and we'll give you 5 or 6 or 7%. And then we will add our margin, and we would then mortgage the houses out at 10 and 11 and 12%, depending on the monies that come in. So now all of a sudden we've created not only a building technology that reduces cost, but we also disrupting the traditional banking system that has just one formula. You pay 10% down, you pay 20% over 20 years. So what we've done is we said we need to reduce cost of home ownership. So firstly, if you look at reducing the cost of construction, which is vital. Then number 2, cost of the margin or the interest rate. So this is, I believe, for us, a phenomenal model that will roll out throughout Africa and hopefully the rest of the world. I've jokingly, I've written a letter to Bill Gates, and I said to him, he needs to please move over. There are more people that want my windows than his windows.
Thank you, Henny. A well thought out model that's practical. I do see that Reza has a question or comment. Reza, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Alex. Thank you, all the speakers. Regarding the key fundamental question of Henny about why. He said why. I believe that is really important questions. Why we will follow the old-fashioned methodology for urbanization, for architecture, for everything. And we don't change until someone, a new movement, push us to change. We never change ourselves until we feel we are back, we are behind a movement with specific speed, change everything, and we are behind, we start changing. And that is very key question. Why we don't want this kind of transformation? Everything's changed. You can see the process of changing monitor in the computer or technology within, I believe, 3 decades, 2 decades, everything changed, and we still use the old methodology of housing. And it's interesting, and we don't want to change because it has some costs. We need to come together, and that is a fundamental need for changing the method of our lifestyle, method of our consumption, and we need to change because and for this kind of fundamental change, we need to work like soldiers. We need to work 24 hours. Otherwise, the future is not that much fantastic. Thank you, Henry.
Thank you, Reza. So just for some of you who may not know, Reza is the chair of Urban Economy Forum, offering us his inspiring and wise words there. So it is 4:30. I essentially today's done, but if anyone has kind of a final question, final remarks, we can I guess give someone one last moment to take the floor. If not, I can provide some closing remarks and we can wrap up our day. They always say wait 7 seconds.
Can I have a word, please?
Yeah, go Krishnan, go.
Sorry to take the floor. I mean, yeah, at the end of the day when everybody is kind of more or less winding down. I'm just wondering, the two things here. One is that the whole question of, this morning we talked about the need for housing codes, yesterday also, the question of designing housing codes according to the new norm, or that means for environmentally friendly, as well as it could be using material that are based on circular economy. So very often, how does the housing code changes in tune with the needs of the hour, both when it comes to climate change, carbon neutrality, as well as the financial possibilities? Now, many banks are saying that unless the houses comply with the building codes. But in developing countries, building codes are different from the kind of building codes that we have, for example, in the industrialized countries. So I'm wondering, people like, working in this field, have they thought anything about the need for financiers, technology people, and others working together with, developing building codes for cities that takes care of all these different considerations?
Does any of the speakers or perhaps the audience even like to field that question?
Alex, let me, it's John Palmer, right? Can I?
Go ahead, John.
I think the trade-off that Christian made there in his remarks was absolutely right. We want building codes to address a lot of issues that we have, but we have to keep in mind that they're costly, and that
Exactly.
there's a very difficult trade-off between achieving certain goals that are involve environmental sustainability and at the same time addressing goals of affordability.
Yeah, I mean, that's a major issue. Yeah, indeed. Thanks.
Excellent. Okay, with that, it is 4:30, and this concludes our day here. Just some kind of concluding remarks to summarize what we spoke about. Dr. Shlomo, he mentioned about the developing countries require housing finance and are most in need, and they require their own context, and its solutions are likely not from the developed world. There's a growing demand for all spectrum of housing, and housing finance must be addressed in the spectrums. We talked about vulnerable populations are greatest at risk. We spoke about technology solutions for housing finance. NIMBYism was referenced in nearly all the presentations, and a challenge for governments and developers. And then we also spoke about as we just heard in the last question there, the trade-offs on building codes. So a number of good items there that we can add to our resolution, which will be available, I believe already, actually, if you would like to take a look at it. So with that, today we conclude. And just a reminder, if you would like to join us for tomorrow, we have another whole day of proceedings, I think is the right word, and even the resolution drafting. And I encourage you all to join us. So with that, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Alex. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Have a good evening. Thank you.
Seeing everybody. Yeah.